The New York Post recently published an article about single woke females. For the first time in American history, the majority of women between 18 and 35 are voluntarily opting out of the traditional pathways of marriage and parenthood. Among liberals, it has become a total obsession. Yet nobody on the left can answer the question, what is a woman? Birth rates are dropping for many reasons, some of which are downright depressing. A lot of people are asking, what's the point of starting a family? It's strange and it's awful and it's a suicide note for humanity. Because of the importance of parenthood and because it is rooted in thousands of years of love and meaning that is so enormous, it's often impossible to describe. The last time today's guest was on this podcast was 3 or 4 years ago. And she wasn't a parent. She wasn't married. And this has led her into an incredible transformation. She hosts the Walk-Ins Welcome podcast and recently started her podcast with her husband. What is it like working with a spouse? I hope we can get to that today. Today's guest can talk about anything to anyone with the ease of a gifted storyteller, a brilliant writer, and humorist. She's tweeted earlier this week, I have some thoughts on the future of human civilization for anyone who can't get Elon on their podcast. Please welcome Bridget Phetasy. Before we get to Bridget, let me tell you about Home Title Lock. When was the last time you checked the legal title to your home? Why? Because most victims of home title theft don't know they're a victim until it is way too late and the criminal's already gone. Take this homeowner, for instance. She was getting ready for a home remodel when everything got shut down. She discovered her property wasn't in her name anymore. Not at all. Turns out she was the victim of a devastating crime called home title theft. A criminal had forged the deed to her home and taken over as the new owner. Now she's having to fight to get her home back. Your home, property, equity, your most valuable assets, they're all up for grabs. May I suggest you hire Home Title Lock to protect your most valuable assets. Home Title Lock. Go there now, HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code Beck and save. HomeTitleLock.com. So good to see you. Welcome back.
So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
You were on the radio when you were pregnant.
Yes.
But the first time we met about 4 years ago, and you look great.
Thank you.
You look healthy.
Yeah.
And I know just in listening to you and corresponding occasionally that you are much healthier and happier and all these changes in your life.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to that here in a second. But you were just telling me right before we started that you had an Uber driver from Venezuela.
I just love talking to the Uber driver.
I do
always
too.
talk to them.
Right?
I want to know their whole story.
It's
I'm
so
like, how
great.
did you end up in Dallas? How did you? He was in Florida first, and then he came to Dallas, and it's a really funny story about air conditioning sales, and his sister was here, and so then, but he was talking about how prosperous Venezuela was, and he said when he was a kid, he was 9 years old, and he was sent to America to learn English, and just what he didn't really want to come here, but then he saw the conditions deteriorating, and he started talking to me, and he said I always kind of just gauge if my passengers can handle,
truth.
what level of conversation I can have with them. He said, because people have gotten really mad. and then he started saying the thing everyone kind of says in private these days. And he said, the thing that they're doing where they're taking a 5-year-old and they're saying, maybe you're not a girl. He's like, this is child abuse. And then he just started.
The only thing better than Uber drivers, New York cabbies.
Yeah.
They're really, especially if they're old.
Yeah.
they're driving way too long and way too fast, but you can learn so much from them.
Yeah,
and
so
funny.
he was saying, he just was saying he said communism looks really good on paper. Yeah. And when you're young and idealistic, it sounds great. And then he was just talking about that the people who still control the means to everything are still humans, and they still want the same things we all want. And they want to control things, and it was just funny. It was just a funny conversation, and he was like, look at Venezuela now. It's tragic.
Look at California.
Yes, I'm a refugee.
I know. Washing up on the beach of Texas.
I had someone pull up to me in my town now in Texas, and he was like, go back to where you came from. Like, excuse me, sir. Now I know. Yeah, no, it's the California driving probably.
Yeah,
gave
probably.
Me away.
Yeah. Do you? Why did you move to Texas specifically?
Life is so strange. The last time I was here, I was joking that I feel like I'm in like a giant improv where I'm like, yes and no, I'll go on Glenn Beck, because I wouldn't have ever thought I would end up in these situations or places being kind of
good though, isn't
no,
it?
it is.
Yeah.
I think it's good to, I had a friend say the other day, follow the truth wherever that leads you, even if it's not somewhere you want to go. Did you ever think you would be living in Texas? And I think part of me always wanted to live in, I love driving around America. Texas has always fascinated me. I think it's like its own ethos and its own culture, and everyone immediately becomes a Texan the minute they step foot here.
I know. It's weird, isn't it?
We have mutual friends who have moved here from other places, and they're like, online, we need to text it. We need to. I'm like, you can't even drive. You're from New York. You don't even have a license.
It is so true.
What kind of Texan doesn't have a license?
Yeah.
It doesn't know how to drive, but
immediately
you get that, like, we're going to be free.
And if you are born here, it's even worse. My son was 5, maybe, when we were talking about moving to Texas. He's adopted. He was born here in Texas. Okay, but he was, soon as out of mom, he's up, to New York and Connecticut. So we never talked about Texas. And he's sitting at the table, 5 years old, sitting at the table. We're talking about moving to Texas. And he said, you all realize that I will be the only true Texan in the family. And I'm like, where does that come from? Where does it come
There's
from?
something in the soil and the water. I don't know what
great.
It is.
It's great.
It's funny. My daughter took her first steps in Texas. She wasn't born here. She was born in California. But I'm like, I feel like that makes you a Texan.
I have friends who will argue absolutely not. You know Marcus Luttrell?
No.
Okay, so Marcus Luttrell, Navy SEAL. His brother is also a Navy SEAL and doctor now. And he was still in the SEALs, and he was in Virginia. His wife was about to give birth, like days away from giving birth. And he calls his brother Marcus up here in Texas. They grew up in Texas. And he said, bro, I just want to make something clear. Even though my son is born in Virginia, he's a Texan, right? And Marcus seriously said, no, he'll be a Virginian. And he's like, come on, man. He's like, no, he'll be a Virginian. So he put his 9-month pregnant wife into a car and drove to Texas and had the child here.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's
commitment to the cause. That is commitment to the cause. It really is. It's so funny, though. There is something about it where you
it's cool.
It is cool. I'm definitely... It took me a minute to kind of breathe into the different pace. I've been in Los Angeles for 16 years. And I think and I do really think that you get Stockholm syndrome living in these cities in California that are kind of falling apart all around you. And it was like when I used to go to Joshua Tree, and it would take me a couple of days to just let my nervous system calm down from being in a city, but also just be walking my daughter around and not looking around constantly for, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say every single walk I took her on, it was dodge someone who looks crazy or sketchy or looking around, and living like that constantly, that fight or flight, it does something to your nervous system. So it took me a couple of weeks to really breathe into the pace and the just be able to relax a little bit.
Besides the weather, do you miss anything in California?
I'm a freak. I love this weather.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a weirdo though.
Oh, it's like 150 with 2,000% humidity right now.
It reminds me of Sri Lanka though, or India. There's just something.
That's where I've always wanted to live. Nobody wants to live there.
I love Sri Lanka. It's sad what's happening there too. I don't mind the heat. I prefer it over the cold. My husband, luckily, is the same way, and we walk out at 8 when it's still 95, and we're like, we love this.
I know. The heat, I was just on vacation a couple of weeks ago in Great Britain. Mm-hmm. No air conditioning.
No.
Okay. And it was like 80 degrees. And I'm like, no one in America would put up with this. I'm like, what is wrong with you people? And they were all fine with it. And I'm like, get some air conditioning. This is a 2,000-year-old building. And get a window unit. Put some air in this place. And everybody was fine. It's different in America as you know, the World Economic Forum and all the Green New Deals. They're expecting us to not have air conditioning, or not the way America has. I think what you're doing in schools and mutilating kids, you add air conditioning, and that's a bridge too far.
That's when, like, even the staunchest libs are like, maybe Glenn has a point.
How could you live here before air conditioning? You could, apparently, but
well, I don't know. I mean, I can escape it, so I do get to walk and I would worry about my daughter, my dog. You know, they need to be able to escape this. But there was no air conditioning in Sri Lanka. We always used to be like, we need an AC room. Don't they have AC here?
I have to tell you, when we were walking down London, it was so hot and hot in every place. And I'm walking into these stores, and I'm like, oh, no air conditioning in here either. In New York, we open up the front of the stores when it's really hot, so the people on the street feel the air conditioning like, I got to just go browse in here for a while. The complete opposite. Yeah. They think we're nuts. We're nuts.
I was in Rome one year, and it was so hot, and even me who likes the heat, it was making me, I was like, imagine what it was like back then.
No. And then you add the smell of it. We were in London, and the river's still brown from centuries of people pooping in it or something. I don't know. But imagine what that was like.
No, I like to imagine. We have it so good. We have it so good.
We do.
The amount of complaining that goes on, I'm like, this is an unparalleled time in human history, and maybe we just need challenges, and
I think we do.
And we're self-destructing because it's not hard enough.
And there's not, I don't know, we're away from all other countries that, you know, you look at Canada and you're like, I mean, you know, I'm glad I'm not living in Canada, but it's not that bad. You know what I mean? Mexico's got some beaches. You know, it's bad, but it's not like some of the rest of the world that was so far away from us. We lose context, and we have. Honestly, I think of my father always saying to me, "Oh, you're crying? I'll give you something to cry." I feel like Dad. You know, maybe in the role of God, it's like, oh, really? That's bad?
Yeah.
I'll give you something to cry about, because we're whining and crying now. My gosh, if things turn.
No, don't. I mean, there's not much. There are more and more people, I think, who will survive it because there are more and more preppers born every day.
Out of necessity.
I feel like I was joking with my friend. I'm like, I'm not sure if I should be preparing my daughter for, like, growing her own food and hunting, or like going to Mars, you know? It's like, what?
Right.
I was talking to Tim Urban about this, and he has a young one too. And I'm like, I don't know, should I be stockpiling seeds or teaching her how to code?
Definitely not to code. Those days are over
Right.
with AI.
With AI.
I mean, it is a weird. I read something the other day that the first industrial revolution was 1760.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The first, second, and third industrial revolutions from 1760 to now, okay, all of that change will be dwarfed by the change from 2020 to 2040.
Yeah, it's all exponential. It is. When you look at Tim Urban, actually has this illustration on. It's in the intro to his book, and he talks about if human history was 2,000 pages or something, and it's like the last, all of the last industrial revolution, what you were just talking about, is all on the last page.
I know. I know. But it was a slow and rather boring and smelly story before that. I mean, I was in Scotland, and you'd go one place, and they'd say, and this is where the plague happened, and this is how they lived. You go to another place, and 200 years later, they were living like this, and you're like, that's not much different.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, Jonah Goldberg, I think, in his book talks about this too. If aliens came and checked in on Earth, every 5,000 years, it would be like, oh, not much has changed for 200,000 years. And then suddenly you're like, wait, what happened?
I know.
How did we get cars and planes?
And what's weird is I just don't think it is a coincidence that, when you're living as a serf, you can't own land. You're on the king's land, and so anything you do to make your life better, he'll just take. He'll make more money. Mm-hmm. People just lose. Like, why am I going to do that? Why would I put myself out? And then we have freedom in the idea of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and America does this, and the rest of the world behind us, but still does this, and nobody connects the two. It's like all of a sudden, around 1800, things just got great.
Humans started doing awesome. I mean, it is like our mutual friend Carol Ross' new book, You Will Own Nothing, which is terrifying. I see these things that, although I was reading something the other day, I think it was just a tweet, and someone said, oh, you think you own your land? Try not paying property taxes. And I was like, ugh.
Right.
Freedom.
I know.
Uncomfortable.
I've been thinking about that because, look at me. I'm not in the greatest of health. and I was thinking about, when you get older and you have kids, and I want to talk to you about the changes in you already. But when you get older and you have kids, you start to think about leaving, stuff behind. And lucky for me, I'm going to spend it all before I die. So, but I was thinking I couldn't leave them my house because if I left it to one of them and they didn't have a very good job, even if the house is paid for, in Texas, you couldn't pay the property tax.
Right.
So do you really ever own anything? I think property tax is the most immoral thing you can do.
It's so unfair. I see it in my hometown where it's a small New England village, essentially, but it's the people who are elderly who own their homes. All of these rich people come in and buy property and all the values go up, and now they have to leave their forever homes because they can't pay property taxes.
It's so wrong.
It seems horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And people will, I don't know if that's capitalism doing its thing, but
no, that's government.
Okay.
Yeah, that's government, isn't it?
This is like taxation is theft.
If all of a sudden I own a home and a bunch of rich people move in and the neighborhood values go up,
sweet.
I'm great.
Right.
Because capitalism says,
now your
win
home
for
is more
me.
valuable.
Yeah. And when I want to, if I want to, I'm going to be sitting pretty.
Yeah.
It's government saying, you don't really own that. You have to pay our taxes.
Yeah.
That's nasty.
I'm not smart enough to understand this.
This weekend is the 1-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And I want to take a moment to recognize the over 64 million babies whose lives were taken at the hands of abortion. And we pray for the mothers who still mourn for their children. And we pray for the mothers who feel they are trapped and have nowhere to go. I think abortion is one of the saddest things. I mean, unless you're celebrating your abortion. But I don't think most women do that. They just don't know what to do. Preborn honors the precious souls who never had a chance to take their first breath and to discover who they could become. We've lost a generation. But also honors the mothers who chose life, the mothers who are still struggling in mourning because of what they chose, and doing the right thing by not dwelling in the past, but saving moms and their children right now. To honor the 64 million deaths, we'd like you to consider donating $64 to honor the precious lives lost and to keep the precious lives of those at risk safe. Can you do that? Even 64 cents will help. Pound 250. That's all you have to do. Hit pound 250, say the keyword baby. Pound 250, keyword baby, or you can go to preborn.com/Glenn.
It's funny. I was joking that my whole life, the other unsettling thing about moving to Texas was becoming basic. What do you mean? It was like my whole life has been just trying to be, I don't know, different or cool, or I felt like I was always chasing some elusive sense of identity, and really I just find so much joy in like the American dream, you know. I want like a nice little piece of land, and I want a good school for my kid to go to where she can ride her bike around with her friends, and I think I joked last time that if you had told me that I was going to quit drinking and end up on this show, I probably would have kept drinking. But now I can extend that to and be married to someone in recovery and have a baby, which is amazing, and end up living in Texas 4 years ago. That wasn't.
Oh, I know. I said to you at the time, you should move to Texas. And you were like, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, there were so many dreams of being someone. You know, I joke,
California will flush that down the toilet every time. It's nothing but shattered people working as a waiter or waitress, waiting for their dream to happen.
I wasn't shattered. Well, maybe a little bit shattered. Was waiting tables. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
No, there's nothing wrong about that.
People ever.
It's if you're still, you've been there for 40 years and you're still going on auditions. You haven't gotten anything.
Such a tough
this is
industry.
Temporary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did move there with big delusions of grandeur, big
sometimes
dreams.
They win, sometimes they work.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just not really, I don't know. I still love doing comedy. I found that. It's tragic what's happened to California, and I know a lot of people disagree with me and they still think it's great, but I lived there for almost 20 years, and the decline that I witnessed while I was there, just around the state, and it's such a beautiful state that it's just tragic.
It is tragic.
San Francisco?
San Francisco is. I was just talking to a guy who
dystopian.
He said he was in London. He said, I'm coming to America. And I said, really, where are you going? And he said, San Francisco. And I said, so you're not really going to America? He kind of looked at me puzzled with that. And I said, have you been keeping up with the news?
You're going to New America.
It's going to be a little different than perhaps you think.
It's so crazy. I mean, if you were in San Francisco 10 years ago and went now, you would be shocked at what's happened. And you'd also be shocked because you probably got your rental car broken into.
I have to tell you, I went to San Francisco maybe 5 years ago. When the Super Bowl was in San Francisco, I went, and that was the last time. And the change that I had seen from 5 years before to then was stark. I can't even imagine what it's like now. I mean, and they're all in denial. The mayor said recently, like, people are saying that companies are moving out.
You're like, this is the craziest part of the time that we live in, is the blatant lying about what people can see with their own eyes.
Right?
You're like, no, they literally just put out a press release. They're shutting down the mall. They're taking their company.
Right.
People are, these conservatives are like, it's not just conservatives, by the way. It's a lot of people are seeing this, and you can label them all conservative if that makes you feel better, but it's still not true.
You know what it is? Thank God it is now the people who have always really kind of believed in the Bill of Rights, but you really kind of didn't need it. You know what I mean? Because it kind of worked anyway. Now you're seeing, oh, crap. All of them are being violated, and this is the result. And so the honest people are coming to the table. You don't have to believe the same things I do. That's the point of the Bill of Rights.
Right. You know what I mean? You're like, welcome to the founding of our country. Yeah, that's been something I've really been saying more and more, is that you don't have to be on the right to reject the left. And they want you to believe that. They've been labeling me that for 4 years now, for 5 years, or however many years since I started opening my mouth. That I don't need to accept that. People, I think, get afraid because they're afraid of the labels that will be put on them. But I do think now is the time for some courage and just saying you have to speak what you see, because the minute you have been scared out of speaking what you're seeing happening, that's you've already lost.
Worse.
Yeah, it's only going to get worse.
So you are kind of fascinated by the apocalypse lately.
We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I mean, I think I've always been joking that it feels very Premageddon-ish. And I think I was thinking about this when I was getting ready this morning to come, just how, there's so much nihilism and so much like dooms. Everybody seems like they're in a doomsday cult. I feel like I joke about the apocalypse, but doesn't every generation feel that way? I mean, they probably thought it was the apocalypse during the Black Plague. Maybe they didn't have a word for it.
Yeah. I think the best thing is, if you lived, my grandparents living through the Depression and World War II and seeing that evil of the Nazis. And I don't know if they saw it as clearly as we can see it now, if you care to look. But that's madness, what was going on. And it's the same stuff. 1925, do you know the first trans surgery happened in Weimar Republic?
I don't know. I'm out of my depth here.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that.
But that guy died because the doctor just shoved a uterus in a man. Okay. But all of these things were happening, and it happens over time, and it's just a slow boil to where people just lose all reason.
Yeah.
And I think if you're watching that from the outside or could see it and you weren't numb, I think you might have thought, this might be the end of the world, But I mean, now I think it might be.
I'm just trying to follow this exact line of thought. Wait, are you saying the trans stuff then led to the Nazis?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying here's what. Yeah, I should explain.
Follow the thread. Yeah. I'm like, wait.
So yes. So let me. It probably should clarify. So Weimar Republic, first Germany. And World War I happened, and all the churches lost the credibility because they were like, God's on our side. We're going to win this victorious war. And it was a bloodbath. So the churches had lost their credibility because they had become political. So people aren't listening to church anymore. Then the dollar or their mark starts to spiral out of control. Youth, the 20-somethings, they become the wealthy ones because they don't have families to feed. So they could take some of their salary and invest it, and make money, but everybody else had to take every dime to buy food and housing and everything else.
Okay.
So, and there's a shift of power to the 20-somethings,
okay.
right? So then, because 20-somethings are 20-somethings, They're living a very decadent. Cocaine is pushed. All kinds of.
I don't know about this.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff really pushed, and society begins to decay. Then the first sexology university is founded, and it's all about LGBT. They're pushing trans. It's the movie Cabaret, okay, except on steroids.
Okay.
And then pedophilia starts to crop into the schools. The churches see the opportunity of, see, this is what happens when we don't have God.
They get in on the pedophilia.
Wait a minute, everybody's doing it. No. So the churches do what churches do, well, at least a lot of them, and they don't talk about what the principles of Christ are. Instead, they're like, our faith is the right faith, and we're going to jam it down everybody else's throat. They get people who say, our children are in jeopardy here. Okay, this madness has got to stop. They get involved. They find the Nazis, who are not religious, in fact, hate Christianity, and really anybody that won't bow to the state. They see these SA guys, these stormtroopers on the streets that are, I mean, you didn't get the whole population to do Zig Heil and raise your arms because everybody liked it. The stormtroopers would come in the late 20s and early 30s, and they would beat people, sometimes to death in the streets, if you didn't do that. So everybody was like, I don't want any trouble. Heil. Okay? So that culture, they saw this, and they saw them, because Hitler was talking about religion and God and our decaying morals right at the very beginning. They went, maybe he'll help. The first book burnings, I didn't know this until recently, the first book burnings were the sexology books.
Okay.
And then everybody lost control of everything. The first people in the death camps were gays and especially trans people. They were the first to go. So when somebody LGBTQ positive, who's saying like, hey, this is my movement and here's my flag. When they say you're a Nazi, they may know more about, I doubt a lot do, but they may know more about the actual history and say Christian nationalists are very dangerous. Historically, you're right.
Right.
Okay. But that movement was not Christian nationalist, but they played that pivot role.
Right. But isn't that the kind of current fear the left has of the backlash to a lot of this trans stuff in the country?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's only because you're jamming it down people's throats. Our biggest strength is also our Achilles heel. We're tolerant. We just want to get along. Okay. And if all of this stuff would have been introduced and not in our schools per se,
right,
and you could talk about it and debate about it, I don't think you'd be sitting on the powder keg you are. You're now forcing everyone to be involved, and that doesn't sit well whether you're a Nazi or transgender activist.
Right.
It doesn't matter. When you say it's my way or the highway, you're putting powder in that keg.
Yeah, there seems to be it's like these two opposing forces that are extreme. And
right?
it's
and
unsettling.
I think most people are in here.
Most people are. I mean, the piece that I just dropped today actually was how the public lost pride because how pride lost the public because there was this Gallup poll that came out recently that everybody was like, look at the drop from conservatives on the support for gay marriage. I'm like, underreported. Look at the Democrat drop. There was a drop, a dip.
Look at the numbers of the gay community.
Yeah.
I know a lot. I mean, we work with a lot of gay people, and they're like, this is nuts. This has just gone too far.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating because as I was writing this piece and I was going down several rabbit holes, I wanted to, and I could have made this piece 10,000 words had I wanted to, because there's so many, it's a confluence of so many forces at the same time that are occurring. One being that I feel a very illiberal movement has, and we see this kind of all across the board in America, just as Douglas Murray said in this piece, parasitically attached itself to gay rights in this instance.
Big time.
And that's a very liberal equality ideal that they have, but it was very much lit, and Andrew Sullivan contributed some brilliance to this piece, and he said it was live and let live, and now it's my way or nothing.
the highway.
And I think Americans are going, fine, it's nothing then. Okay. Don't make me choose between this stuff, like to go back to the driver. Why let a kid be a kid? Why don't make me defend this? And I don't want to have to fight this in our schools. And it's so insidious. But then you go down the other rabbit hole and it's like, why is it everywhere? Why is Pride like a national, as again, Douglas Murray, the holy month of Pride? How did this become something corporations all change their
logos?
Unless it's Saudi Arabia, unless it's their Saudi account.
Yeah.
And you go down the rabbit hole of ESG and CEI, and
you understand.
And you're like, this is nuts. This is social credit. It's crazy. Most people can't understand it. They're just trying to raise their kids. They see this everywhere. Their daughter has 3 girlfriends who are now boys. They're like, what the hell is going on? And it's easy to sit down and try and explain, well, sit down, let me tell you about the Frankfurt School and queer theory. Do you have several hours? Oh, and by the way, there's this thing called ESG. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Oh, no? Well, it's just this global mechanism for basically controlling liquidity. And they've got a racket that has all these massive corporations by the balls. Do you have another several hours? No. People don't. So they feel that, I feel like it accelerates tribalism because it's too confusing, which is part of the point.
Correct. It's why people say you're either with me or against me. And that's so dangerous.
Right.
That's where the religious thing comes, because people will say, well, I believe in God and I believe in morals and standards and everything else, but then it's so easily attaches itself to control exactly the way Murray was talking about. It just you have to be so careful. We are in a moment where it's like everybody should just have their mantra, count to 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think too, it's easy not to get caught up in it. There was a part of me that was very happy to be the kind of cool Gen Xer in the back of the school laughing at all of the world while it burns, which I still do enjoy, by the way. Don't get me wrong. But then I had a daughter, and suddenly I'm like, shit, I'm going to have to fight this. I'm going to have to fight this stuff. I'm going to have to get involved. Or I'm going to have to homeschool my kid. Because I just want her, I got to be a kid. There was stuff in my childhood that was dysfunctional, but I didn't have this stuff in school. It wasn't the gender-bred man, the gender, all this like weird stuff. I didn't know. I was actually so innocent, and sure, they also have the internet, which does not help. But there's an innocence that's being taken, and it doesn't. And there are guys like James Lindsay who are much more, I think, I feel bad for him because he's,
I know, so do I.
He's kind of light years ahead of the game. And it's got to be frustrating.
The problem, and I don't mean it like this, so how do I rephrase it? The frustrating thing with James Lindsay is he is so deep.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk about things and make people's eyes gloss over quickly on, ESG or whatever. But James, he's so deep into it.
And he's so smart.
And he's so smart. His language is a little bit Marxist at times. You know what I mean? He uses the language that a lot of Americans don't understand,
right,
because he's accurately describing it. You know what I mean? And names and things, and you're just like,
because
but it's all so important,
and
but it's so complex,
so insidious. That's part of the problem. It's this thing where you're, and I say this in my piece, for the Spectator piece, it's like people can intuit it. You know, they're like, this isn't right. And I think a lot of parents during the pandemic were like, what are they talking? What are you learning?
Right.
Excuse me, what are they talking about on this weird Zoom class? And you can intuit that, but then the minute you try and point to it, it kind of shapeshifts, or suddenly it's like you're a bigot. And nobody wants to be a bigot. Nobody wants to be a racist. Nobody wants to be a Nazi.
Back with more from Bridget Phetasy in just a second. First, let me tell you about a great American business. It started out with a couple of guys, and one of them was really, really talented, could make anything. He said, would you make me a belt, and one that works better than average belts? He came up with this design of this belt, and he made it. And then friends started saying, hey, would you make me one? And they knew they had something. So they started a business. Well, here's the thing. They wanted to do, if they were going to do a business, they wanted to make sure that it was all American, that it was using American products. It was all sourced here in America, American labor doing it. And now they've expanded. They do wallets, really great, different wallets, and really great socks. This American business pays American ranchers to raise specially bred sheep for the wool. Then another American company goes through the wool and gets it ready and makes it into the thread. And then another company here in America weaves the socks. American-made products done right by American labor. Grip6.com/Beck. That's grip6.com/Beck. Talk to me about the difference between you 3 years ago and you as a mom.
Well, I've been radicalized. Well, let's talk about extremism. I've been fully radicalized.
Because
slightly.
You're a mom.
Well, yeah, there's certain, and because I love America, and I was the person that was the 20-something imperialist America. Yeah. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, and I apologize for using this, I'm kind of a recovering libtard. I should write a 12-step program, you know? Admit that you're a libtard and your life has become miserable. And it is, and that's okay. It's okay to be, I was idealistic. It's okay to question some of our country's decisions. We should absolutely be involved.
We've done horrible things.
We've done horrible things. Mm-hmm. And
I want to fix them. I would just like us to have a serious conversation, just a checklist. What did we do? Okay. Is it still being done? Mm-hmm. Okay, done. Let's bold this out. Let's never do that again. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just deal with the things. We're still doing horrible things, and we're talking about what?
Yeah.
We can't heal unless we actually look at the real things rationally, make sure they're fixed, and move on to the next.
I think, too, living in a city where I saw it, I couldn't look around. That was the benefit of being in California. It's a uniparty. I couldn't look around and blame conservatives for the city
rot
falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
I could only blame the people that were being elected, and it was blue all the way down.
So, but how come more people don't see that in California?
Again, I think there is. I had a friend who said something that really stuck out to me, that the true and only guiding ideology in America is but the right. There's this there's this going on and this going on, and if you're a conservative, you probably have to shut your mouth and not really express your opinions at work or around your friends, because and you see that disparity and don't think, oh, maybe one side has a lot more power than the other side, but the right. And again, I don't think guys like Trump, which will probably piss off many of your people in your audience, but I don't think it does people any favors, because I do know a lot of particularly like boomers who have seen what's going on and they're like, this is nuts. And Trump is too much of just a narcissistic loose cannon for them to feel safe kind of saying, okay, we need to push back against some of this crazy in our own party, and look at the state that it's in. You have Fetterman announcing Biden. It's just like, we're supposed to just take our sugar and eat it. That's what we're supposed to just be like, oh, we're all the dog in the meme drinking coffee. Like, this is fine.
Right.
And I think I know a lot of them have said, I'd kind of in hushed, shameful tones, like, I'd vote for DeSantis, somebody who seems younger, disciplined.
Somebody who, this is, I think, a large part why Biden won is because there were a lot of Americans that just said, I want to return to normalcy. Okay. I know times are changing, everything. Just, can we turn everything down?
And then there were the food shortages.
Right. It was, and we've turned it up.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see who is going to win the nomination, because I think the Democrats are making it more likely that he's the nominee by
Biden. Or
Trump.
Of course they would love that.
Yeah, they would love that.
Because they know exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
Which is that there are a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who have had it with them.
But there's a lot of Republicans who are saying the same thing. We just want sanity.
Yeah.
But when you push a society so far...
Not an 80-year-old madman with a revenge mission.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good.
I don't know. I can't say that I know what would be good. Or bad, because everything is so crazy. But I would like to, people are like, can we get the boomers? I'm like, these guys aren't even boomers. They're silent generation. Can we maybe just get a boomer? I have, nothing against people who are old. I just think you should be enjoying your grandchildren and
I 100%. Have you seen?
I almost said corporation, but same thing.
Have you seen Vivek Ramaswamy?
Oh yes.
What a breath of fresh air! I'm like, yeah, somebody like that would be great.
Yeah,
would be great. I don't know if he even has a chance to even be on the debate stage, but that's the kind of guy and attitude, and someone who You really think that Biden is tweeting his own stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump is. Joe Biden, I bet, hasn't even used an iPhone, necessarily himself. We are in a different world. It is time for people, and I say this as a guy who's almost 60. Mm. Okay? We've had a good run, and especially, I think, my age, I'm the last year of the boomers.
Okay.
And I don't really relate to the boomers.
Yeah.
And I'm the last year of the boomers, and I feel like I've dealt with these hippies long enough. Mm-hmm. And I feel like saying, dude, you screwed everything up, and we had to pay for a lot of that back in the 60s.
Right.
My generation.
Right.
Okay? And we were the latch kid, generation. And now you are the exact opposite of what you said was right.
So crazy.
It's time for you to let go and let someone else deal with it. They talk about how the Declaration and Constitution just it wasn't written for this era. And you were?
Yeah.
I mean, you were a teenager when? 1946, 1951? Yeah. Come on.
Yeah. It's definitely shows me, too, just how hard power is to let go of when you have it, no matter who you are.
And what's weird, it's not even who you are. Like, you look at, what's her name, Feinstein. She doesn't even know who she is. It's the institution that just wants the body. Fetterman, I feel so bad for him.
I know.
So bad for him.
It's so... And that's the problem, is that it pulls on all this. You're like, I feel bad for this person. I don't want to. And I feel like everyone has a right to demand that their leaders be competent. But those norms were shredded, and I'm not exactly sure. I do think, though, I would prefer, as much as it absolutely pains me to say this, Gavin versus Ron, just because at least it would be, I feel, accurate representations
of both sides.
Both sides, and what we're
agree.
actually trying to confront. And
I agree.
Someone needs to push Biden when he says, I'm pro gender affirming care. People need to push these people to define what that is. Tell me what does that mean, sir? Mr. President, what exactly is gender affirming care? Can you describe it to me? Do you even know what it is? Do you know what you're supporting? Do you know where you are?
Do you know your name? But you can't get that. Nobody, the press, it's so either evil and they know it, or they're the dumbest people alive, or they're just trapped and feel like I can't do anything.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel trapped. I was saying this just on Twitter yesterday. There was that woman, I think her name was Robinson, and she was talking at some hearing about how she read an article in NPR about, this is why it's not a big deal that biological men should be competing against women. And I'm like, where are the female athletes? I understand that it's a culture of, just suck it up and like you take your loss, but this is fundamentally not fair. And you are going to lose. I was saying, joking, I'm like, I hope these women who don't speak up lose their job to a mediocre male, because you didn't say anything. And if you don't, you're going to cost another woman her spot.
Did you see the activist in Congress yesterday talking about Serena Williams? And saying there is no difference between a man and woman. Right, this is the
woman I'm talking about. I think her name was Robin. I can't remember her name.
And wait, there's no difference? Serena Williams, when she was good, was beaten by the 207th ranking man at tennis. You can't tell me that a man can be imposing and can hold a woman and rape her and do whatever because a woman doesn't have the strength, which is all true on some men. I mean, you could beat the snot out of me, but you know what I mean? Generally speaking, we have more muscle. We are bigger. So to say that there's no difference is ridiculous.
It is interesting, too, because it's talking out of two sides of your mouth at the same time. So how do you explain rape culture, for example?
Right.
If this is true, this can't be true. Must not be. It must not exist.
Right.
If there's no biological difference between men and women, why does this happen?
Right.
Women should just be able to fight back.
Correct.
It's insane, and people are afraid. I think people feel trapped. I think they're afraid. Douglas Murray said, I wish I could have just posted the transcriptions of every person that I interviewed, because they were all so brilliant. Trying to put it into one article felt impossible. But Douglas was saying that he felt that the reason, because the UK is actually quite ahead on this, and he said it's because somebody like J.K. Rowling, who's massively huge, spoke out very early against this, and that we are behind because someone like Oprah hasn't stood up and been like, hey, women should have their spaces.
It's really interesting being over there. J.K. Rowling there are Harry Potter things everywhere.
Yeah, she's huge.
Everywhere. She is gigantic.
Yeah.
Going to Oxford, they have made one of the gargoyles, one of the figures in Harry Potter's. She has an honorary doctorate at Oxford, and I'm trying to piece this together. You have somebody that popular. Oprah doesn't have anything in any college, reflecting on a gargoyle, anything she's ever done. You have a society that is monetarily really benefiting from her work. She's deep into the culture. And they've just destroyed her.
Yeah.
Just destroyed her.
I know.
It's insane.
And all she's doing is defending women. It's just like...
And you're not defending women if you're standing up and saying the truth. All of a sudden, how do you even make that logic work?
I'm not sure. I feel like it's just something that's kind of cool, and there's something young people they feel purpose being a part of this movement or whatever. And I'm not, I don't know. I talked to the Women's Liberation Front, the women who are fighting for they're pushing the lawsuit against the California corrections for men in women's prisons. And this is the kind of stuff people need to be pushed to say on record. You agree with, you're for gender-affirming care for minors. You agree with putting them on puberty blockers. You agree with pausing their development, which we know is not a pause. We know that now. You, even though most of the European countries are backtracking, not Canada. Canada's going full steam ahead.
Canada's gone nuts. But you look at all of the places we were told we should be more like. Yeah, France,
Sweden,
Norway. All of those are going, whoa, slow down.
Yep. They're looking
course.
At the science.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. And this is the people who are always like, these anti-scientific idiots who are, it's maddening. But I do, my kind of white pill, as Michael Malice would say, is that more and more people do seem to be kind of reaching their limit. I mean, I wrote a piece probably 4 or 5 years ago being like, you can't just shame people into voting the way that you want because you say they're a bigot or they're racist because of whatever your idea about things is, and you want them to vote away. And yesterday, Kat Rosenfeld wrote this piece for the Boston Globe about how progressives are minting conservatives. And I'm like, yeah, I said this 4 years ago, and now it's even crazier. Now, that was when that was pre all of this, like, even more insane stuff, and post-COVID, which was also insane.
A couple of years ago, met the people at Jace Medical, and I started talking about the Jace case. The Jace case holds 5 of the most important antibiotics for emergency use. Well, at the time when I first met them, I said, I'm a prepper. And they said, so are we. And I said, prescription drugs, heart medicine, high blood pressure, psychiatric medicine. What is going to happen if we have a disruption in the supply chain for those people who have to have that medicine? And they just sat back in their chairs and smiled and said, see, that's why we knew we needed to talk to you. We're working on it. Well, they have the new product out. It's called Jace Daily, a prescription supply service that allows you to get up to a 12-month backup supply of your prescription medication just in case of an emergency. This will cover a whole bunch of medications like cholesterol, if you're a diabetic, heart health, blood pressure, mental health, and more. Your order will be reviewed by a certified healthcare professional and delivered right to your door. It is something that has given me real peace of mind because that's the one piece of the puzzle I couldn't figure out how to prepare for my family. JaceMedical.com. Go there now, enter the promo code Beck for a discount on your order. It's promo code Beck at JaseMedical.com. What do you think of RFK?
Yeah, he's interesting. I think he's this is the state of the Democratic Party, that he's like, people are just so thirsty. And I do think Stephen Miller, not the Stephen Miller who worked for Trump, Stephen Miller, who's the writer, he was saying that he kind of gives permission to a lot of people on the left who were vaccine skeptics, for example, and just were very happy to let everybody say, it's those MAGA people who don't want the vaccine. I'm like, you know how many people I knew in LA who didn't get the vaccine quietly and just we're fine having everyone think it was like, oh, those hicks over there didn't get the vaccine. Well, and he was saying the same thing. The original kind of anti-vax community was like in the Palisades.
Right.
You know, these are the hippie granola moms.
Right.
And so there was a lot of people, and a lot of people in the black community, rightfully, did not want to get the vaccine. And the press never really...
Why? Is there any kind of history with that? What are you talking about?
The press never had to really address that. They
Yep.
could ignore that and focus on... And so I think RFK is pointing out and giving permission to a faction of the left that has not been able to speak up because they didn't really have a representative.
So I know conservatives who like him because he is, and it's so strange. The left was right about the United States turning into one giant corporation and in business with big business. The right said, that'll never happen. I trust we were dumb as a box of rocks. Okay.
Got that one wrong.
Got that one wrong. Kind of a big one.
Slippery slope.
Yeah. But the things that you were right on, the left is now being the champion.
Yeah, no, that's the other crazy thing.
I mean,
war,
big pharma, endless war.
And he said this when he was on Rogan, which you can't even post those clips on YouTube without getting your channel demonetized. We'll put that in the bucket of other terrifying things that we would need an entirely separate episode for. But that's what he represents. That the silencing of this conversation, the ability to even have the dialogue, the ability to ask the questions.
He has a little bit of what the Democrats are doing to Trump. They're also kind of doing it to him. They're not as severe, but they're silencing him. And people are hungry for anyone who will stand up and say, this is wrong.
Yeah.
He's saying, for instance, I always trusted the FBI and CIA. Oh, my. Have they always been this way? How did I not see that? Okay. But now everybody on the left is like, oh, they're great. I love them.
I love the FBI. Like, what?
Yeah.
As somebody who's Gen X, it's very disorienting.
Oh, I bet
because
it is.
It was all of the things that I was, it was in my kind of recovering, when I was in my full libtardation, that was all the stuff I was fighting against.
Right.
Wars in other countries.
So what happened?
Big pharma.
What happened? It's so weird. From 2000, the year 2000, I am not the same man that I was. I still am, I hate to say, the label conservative, I don't think means anything anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I am a constitutional Bill of Rights American, okay? You agree with me on that? We don't have any arguments, okay, that are severe that we can't work through. But I would make well, this war is important and this is important. And, well, the FBI, it probably was just isolated. All that crap has been proven wrong.
Right.
And so many conservatives are there. And you have a chance of actually changing and doing the things that the liberals, who were actual Bill of Rights liberals, who are saying, this is wrong what we're doing. We have a chance to change it. But maybe it goes back to the first thing you say, but the right. That they just will not see that. I'm not talking about the GOP. I'm talking about common sense people that are like, no, there's a problem here. And shame on me for being so stupid. Good for you. You got it right. Now, did we get anything right that you're starting to discover? You know, because it's the same eye-opening on. It's just, and it's almost on the same things. You're coming our way on some things. I'm coming your way on some things.
Yeah.
And those some things are the important principles.
Yeah. And can we meet in the middle with healthcare, please? Anyone? I feel like, can anyone address this problem? Anyone?
No, we fixed it. Obamacare fixed it.
I mean, that was a little bit jarring coming from California to Texas. It's definitely better in California. Because
Really?
because as somebody who is an independent, I don't think I can get a private PPO as an individual here. I could be mistaken, or it's just way too expensive for me.
I will
have
tell
to be employed by someone. There are groups you can get involved in. And so then I had to get an HMO, and I haven't had an HMO in a long time. And my gosh, it was very eye-opening how people, there are 2 classes, well, probably 3 classes of care in the United States for healthcare. And it's
bad.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, it's gotten much, much worse.
Yeah.
Much more controlled. It's, when I moved from New York, because the company was mine and I had a responsibility, I couldn't carry the same insurance across from New York to, why?
Right.
Why?
I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know.
It's money and payoffs from politicians.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I mean, this is so much of the problem. It really is.
So now that you are a little apocalyptic, but yet a mom,
yeah,
and so you're more grounded.
I'm actually more optimistic, weirdly,
Are
too.
you? Why?
Because that was really the kind of epiphany I had when I was getting ready this morning. Just all men are presented with whatever humanity is dealing with in their time, and they have to deal with it. And this is what I'm presented with, and my job is to prepare my daughter to handle whatever is presented to her in the best way that she can, and pray that she has a good head on her shoulders, and she knows that she's loved, but there's a lot that I'm an old parent, so I'm hyper aware of the fact that I won't be around probably as long as I'd like to be in her life, and so I have to trust that she will be okay. That's my job.
Even not in these times, you'll go through that as a parent.
And it's still better than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still, even though I can look at the horizon and say, oh, this could really go off the rails, is it, and this is kind of what Tim Urban and I were discussing, is it going to be she's going to Mars? Is it going to be she's enslaved by robots? Will it be the grid has gone down and she's growing food? Or will it be just a little bit more of where we are and
a little better, a little worse, whatever. Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I am optimistic seeing how resilient kids are, just how smart they are, how creative they naturally are, and she just forces me to come into the present. It's easy to get spun out in all this stuff. I've been watching the Arnold documentary, which is very interesting. And again, as a 90s kid, I had to watch this. But he was talking about his Nazi father, who had one expression that really stuck with him, which was be useful. And I think about that a lot. I wake up and I try to food prep or be useful. And I do think there might be a crisis of usefulness in our country because they're not doing things. They're going online and working themselves up into a lather over these ridiculous the dumb think pieces and not having enough really nuanced conversations. That's why all the people in the piece about pride that I wrote, they're gays and lesbians and trans men and women, and they have to live with the consequences of this backlash we're seeing, which is why I wanted to reach out to them, but they're also critical of gender ideology. So they represent, I think, where most people fall, and they're the people we should be listening to, the Glenn Greenwalds and Douglas Murray about this topic in particular, Andrew Doyle, and they get the kind of least amount of airtime because we just hear from the activists on either side who are riling each other up. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's one of the most, I think, inspiring things that I've seen in my lifetime is that the going to just the transition we've had, for lack of a better word, around gay marriage and gay rights and gay people in the world. It's miraculous. And in a very short time. And now, and this is where we were joking on Dumpster Fire, and I'm sure it'll get, cut and taken out of context, but we were like, maybe you're right about the slippery slope. And I disagree. It's not necessarily true, but it is, because this other thing is piggybacked like a Trojan horse into it. Although my husband would say that's what they were afraid of, though.
Yes, right. I had a conversation with my daughter. She was at Fordham. She wouldn't talk to me for a while because they had her so ratcheted up that I was anti-gay. And I'm like, I'm a libertarian on this. I don't really care. I don't think the government has anything to do with anybody. Don't tell me how to live. I won't tell you how to live. Don't tell me what my church has to do, and I won't tell you what your church has to do. Leave it be. Let people follow themselves. And she wouldn't even, she got so, and I said, honey, the reason why I speak out about this is because of the and she cut me off. Okay. And I'm like, and I know. And I said, it's not that this will lead to this and this will lead to this. You don't understand the people that are truly pushing with money behind this. Okay. The people that you get that. Are they all going to quit their job because they've got what they wanted?
I mean, yeah, that's another thing we covered in this article, is just that NGOs need a job, but then there's also just this insidious part of all of these theories that is all just destruction. Yeah, it's just deconstruct everything. Yeah. And I'm not smart enough, there's something sinister. It feels sinister. I hate saying that because I don't want to be an extremist. I try so hard to be nuanced and see where everybody's coming from. And then I see activists screaming in people's faces, and and I don't want like conservative people having to check children's genitals before they play soccer. That's crazy too.
Yeah, right. Here's the thing. I said to James Lindsay last time I talked to him, I think, I said, James, the first time I ever met you, you were an atheist, full-fledged. And I said, I don't really know where you stand now. He's had some really good experiences, some really bad experiences. I said, but I swore off the word evil about 2011 because it's a very powerful word.
It feels hyperbolic.
Correct. And I said, however, if I were to define evil, I would define it as a destructive force that destroys everything and makes people slaves to thoughts or physical slaves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anything that tells you can't do it, you won't survive without. Anything that does that, I think is evil. And he agreed with me.
Yeah. I hear this a lot, and I have that same resistance, like being raised Catholic and feeling kind of, it's you're like, oh, evil, is it evil? And then it gets thrown around, and you see it online, and there's lots of hyperbole, and then I don't know, again, I go back to the Arnold documentary, which he kind of brushes over, but it made me really think about talking about his father, how he could be very, hard on them, and also seemed to be an alcoholic, and all of these broken men in Austria who basically got behind this ideology and were believers and were just demolished and demoralized, and what his town was like with all these people. And, there seems to be, I can't help but feel that way about a lot of the stuff I see now that people are kind of co-signing and I think Blair White has said this, where she says, you know, a lot of people are going to pretend they were never on board with this.
Oh, yeah.
They're just going to act like, that's why I say, when people are saying this and they're public figures, you need to push them to say it on record, to say what exactly this stuff means and what they're advocating for. Because, so you're advocating for biological men and women's prisons and shelters and locker rooms. And that was the other thing. I was looking at my daughter and I'm like, I don't want her to have to worry. I was so uncomfortable when I was a young girl going through puberty to the thought of having
uncomfortable with
boys in
same
there?
sex.
Yeah.
You just like, I know.
And this is supposed to, again, people are supposed, and then there's like this whole weird, because we live in such a raging narcissistic time, there's this whole culture of people where it's like cool to be a parent of one of these kids. And this is where I say, because I had an internal debate, you know, like, should the state be saying you can't get this care for your child if you feel that's right for your child? And then I see these moms on Instagram. I'm like, nope, shut it
down. By the way, you brought up Eleanor Schwarzenegger's dad, who was a Nazi, twice now, Nazi. But let me just say this. You said his phrase was, be useful.
Be useful.
I think that's fantastic. I don't think you should say it came from Arnold Schwarzenegger's dad, the country that was like, useless eaters, let's kill them all.
True.
I mean, part of it is kind of like, whatever you do, be useful, because this will come back again.
I know. I don't know how to.
No, I know.
I hate,
I know.
like, I was like, I don't even know how to explain this.
No, I know.
Because I was going to say Arnold Schwarzenegger's dad, but then if I neglect to mention that he's a Nazi.
Just say it's yours.
I'm not going to say it's. I hate. Okay.
It's my mantra. It's my. You know what?
My mantra is just keep going, which.
Very good.
Which is mine. But, you know, I don't like stealing things from people. And I but you're right. I probably shouldn't.
But I think it's a profound, the way you said it, it is a profound statement, because people are not being useful, you know. But then the Nazi thing just kept going in my head. I know.
I had this whole thing. I was writing about it. And this is the thing, you like tiptoe. And this is what I hate about the modern culture, is that I'm hyper aware of like, oh, that's going to get clipped. And here's Bridget saying like, be useful like a Nazi, which is not what I'm saying.
I know. You just have to let it go.
And then I was thinking like, it led me down this other weird rabbit hole of like, are you still considered the greatest generation if you were a Nazi? I mean,
you're the greatest generation on the winning side.
Only the winners were the greatest generation.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I came down to.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, too, just about how much this must have affected his, like, Arnold's psyche and why he loves American might. And he's so, you know, doesn't want to lose. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
And you're probably right.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
We'll talk again.
Thank you for having me.
Especially now that you're in Texas.
Yeah.